Okay, so we are going to get started. This is a hybrid session, meaning that some of the speakers will be joining online. They're already here. We have some speakers who will be speaking to us virtually, and we have some speakers on the stage, which I will invite in a moment. Thank you again for joining. Warm welcome to all of you for coming in here. I'm sure all of you have been having a busy day and really look forward to engaging with you as part of this session. So as you can see, the title of the session is Enablers and Barriers to Transformational Adaptation, Lessons from CLARE Projects in Asia. The title itself is a bit self-explanatory. It's intended to be a bit broad. That's because we have multiple CLARE projects represented in this session, and we wanted to sort of capture the overarching theme across many of the CLARE projects. So this is intended to offer collective learning on transformational adaptation from CLARE projects, from a sample of CLARE projects implemented in Asia, both on enablers and barriers to transformational adaptation. It also builds on the ongoing work by the Research for Impact Hub, which is part of the CLARE program. You will hear from one of my colleagues on the top line findings as part of this session. There are a couple of points I wanted to highlight, although you will notice that the name of the program is mentioned in the title of the session. You might assume that whether this is more of a promotional or informational session of the CLARE program. So we're trying not to do that as much as possible. We're trying to sort of, since this is part of a technical session as part of the APAN, we'll try to sort of bring you some analysis related to the theme of the APAN Forum this year, which is transformational adaptation. So we're really trying to dig in the information related to, or examples from our CLARE projects on enablers and barriers to transformational adaptation. So you can expect more of a on-the-ground examples related to the topic as part of this session. So we have 6 speakers representing 6 CLARE projects in this session. These projects are implemented in several countries in Asia, such as India, Nepal, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Malaysia altogether. If you also include CLARE ASEAN components, so we have more countries here, altogether 11 countries. So just for the context, CLARE is working in 36 countries in Asia and Africa. It's a program that spans both Africa and Asia, but in this session, we'll be focusing more on the Asia part of the program. It's been implemented in 36 countries, and out of which 12 are in Asia. And out of 12, 6 of them are represented here today as part of this session. And I also wanted to note that 6 projects, they are in different stages of implementation. Not all of them are, not all of them started at the same time, which means that some of them are older, some of them are newer than the others. Now, let me introduce the panel members. So I would kindly ask our panel members to come to the stage as I call their names. So let me start by inviting Professor Sovakar Dekal, who is from the Department of Energy and Climate Change Asian Institute of Technology, Thailand. Professor Sovakar is part of the CLARE ASEAN program that is implemented in ASEAN countries. Professor Sovakar, please, may I invite you to the stage, please. Thank you. Now let me invite another panel member, who is Nazia Khan Lina. Nazia is a research associate at Refugee and Migratory Movements Research Unit RMMRU in Bangladesh. This is part of the Success Project. It's also a multi-country project, even though she's from Bangladesh. The Success Project is implemented in Bangladesh, India, Nepal, and Bhutan in Asia. Nazia, can I ask you to come to the stage, please? Thank you. Now, let me also invite another colleague, Pavan Srinath. He's managing partner for communications and development as part of Wells Lab, which is based in India. He represents Clarity project, which is implemented in India, in Asia. It's also implemented in Africa, but in Asia, it's in India. And can I kindly ask Pawan to come to the stage, please? Thank you. Now we have one more speaker available here in person. He's Raju Pandit Chetri. He's the Executive Director of Prakriti Resource Center, Nepal. He's representing ICRA project. ICRA project is implemented in Nepal as part of Asia, although it's also implemented in some other places in Africa. So Raju, thank you for coming to the stage. And we have other speakers joining online. Let me invite Flora Monica Belinario. I would request our colleagues on the technical side to make it more visible. Flora is a Program Implementation and Innovative Finance Director from Fish Forever Philippines. Flora is representing Climate Reefs Project. It's a project implemented in the Philippines and Indonesia. And she's based in the Philippines. Thank you for joining, Flora. We have another speaker, but I think Lutfor is not available yet, as I see, who is going to join shortly. But we do have other speakers. Let me also introduce them. As you can also see on the screen, we have a colleague from the Research for Impact Hub, Sonva Bile, as you can see. He's a researcher who represents the Research for Impact Hub. And we also have our colleague from IDRC, Aryan Dihan. He's the Senior Program Specialist. He has a regional portfolio overseeing CLARE program in Asia. He's based in India. So we have colleagues joining from India, South Africa, and the Philippines. We also have one colleague based in Bangladesh who will be joining us shortly. So now let me move on to the next agenda item. I just wanted to show you the agenda. So what you're going to discuss today. So we have upcoming a video message from CLARE lead, and then we'll have a presentation from the Research for Impact Hub. We'll spend less than 15 minutes hearing from our panel members. Hopefully we'll have some time for a Q&A, and then we'll have a vote of thanks from IDRC at the end. So now to kick off us with the session as a welcoming remark from our management, from CLARE, CLARE co-lead Manuela Di Mauro, who is not available. Manuela is from FCDO. She's the co-lead of the CLARE program, which is implemented in about 36 countries with over 100 partners all over the world. So Manuela is not available in person. She's available, she's in the UK, and she has kindly provided us a video message for us here. Let me play that message.
Afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to speak to you at the 9th Asia-Pacific Climate Change Adaptation Forum, such an important platform for advancing inclusive and resilient climate action across the region. I'm sorry not to be with you in person, but happy to introduce colleagues who will showcase the CLARE program rich engagement in Asia and the Pacific. My name is Manuela Di Mauro, and I represent the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, which is the main funder of the CLARE program, a program which I have the pleasure to be responsible for. CLARE is a flagship research program on climate adaptation and resilience, funded mostly by UK aid and co-funded by International Development Research Centre of Canada, which, besides co-funding, also lead on the implementation of the program. CLARE is bridging critical gaps between science and action by championing Southern leadership to enable socially inclusive and sustainable action to build resilience to climate change and natural hazards. In Asia, CLARE supports a diverse portfolio of projects working to produce evidence that leads to transformational adaptation. These projects embrace co-creation and inclusive approaches to deliver solutions that strengthen the climate resilience of communities. I'm very glad that 6 colleagues from CLARE project in Asia are with you today to share emerging findings related to urban resilience across lower income countries in ASEAN, water management solution in tropical drylands, migration as a form of adaptation across South Asia, and regenerating coral reefs while supporting reef-dependent communities. CLARE is also notable for its dual focus on research for impact and capacity strengthening, which today is showcased through representation from a project working to help build facilitation skills among climate leaders. Our excellent and expert moderator, Biplav Pradhan, who today represents CLARE's Capacity Strengthening Hub. CLARE is proud to contribute to regional dialogue like this platform, and we look forward to collaborating with many of you to advance inclusive and sustainable climate adaptation across Asia. Thank you.
Also, thanks to Manuela. Although I know that she can't hear us, but I will convey the thanks on behalf of every one of us to her later on. I just realized that I didn't introduce myself in the beginning after I hear my own name from Manuela. So my name is Biplav Pradhan. I'm from the CLARE Capacity Strengthening Hub as part of the CLARE program. So now let me move on to the second item, the next item, which is the presentation from the Research for Impact. From the Research for Impact Hub, we have our colleague joining from South Africa. Sonwabile has been working on a paper which is titled Working Towards Achieving Transformational Adaptation in Practice, Evidence and Insights from CLARE's Work Across Africa and the Asia Pacific. So this is an ongoing piece of work. I know that our topic, the theme of this year's APAN is transformational adaptation. We didn't just prepare this, just because it's the theme of the APAN. It's also because our colleagues have been working on this topic for quite some time, and we wanted to take this opportunity to invite our colleague, which is Sonwabile from CLARE, to share some of the top-line findings or some of the top-line messages as part of his ongoing work on transformational adaptation. So let me hand over to Sonwabile to walk us through how's the research work ongoing in regards to transformational adaptation in CLARE projects. So Sonwabile, if you could unmute yourself and join the floor. Over to you, Sonwabile.
Thank you, Biplav. Good afternoon, everyone. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay. Okay, thanks. Thanks. So this paper that we're working on is trying to demonstrate how CLARE projects across Africa and Asia Pacific are actually working towards enabling transformational adaptation. So the data that we used in the paper was gathered during the CLARE exchange event, which took place in Zambia between the 9th and between the 6th and 9th of May 2025. So in that session that we had around transformational adaptation, it was collectively agreed by the CLARE project that TA is critical in addressing the root causes of vulnerability such as poverty and inequality and poor governance, rather than just treating their symptoms. So the aim of this paper is to contribute to the ongoing discussions on transformational adaptation within the UNFCCC community. Next slide, please. So I'll just quickly provide an overview of the enablers which were identified by the CLARE program. So the first enabler is systemic and structural change. So this one, the CLARE projects are working on supporting the shifts in power structures and governance systems and resource ownership. So this requires systems transformation, which rather than isolated interventions. So that will require large-scale transformations in society, economics, and politics, which are all necessary to achieve the SDGs by 2030. Next slide, please. So the next enabler that was identified by the CLARE project is the behavioral and mindset shift. So the CLARE projects are working on encouraging and promoting early policy interventions that move beyond just responding to climate risks when they occur, but towards planning ahead and embracing that the uncertainties of climate change. So while some of the projects are embedding local cultural values and traditional knowledge and behavioral change into their adaptation strategies and their policies. And some projects are considering psychological dimensions of adaptations. Next slide, please. So the next enabler that was identified by the CLARE project is the community-led and participatory approaches. So the CLARE projects are promoting active participation and then promoting local ownership and community-driven decision-making, which empowers the local communities to shape their own futures. And while some of the projects are championing co-creating solutions with local communities to strengthen local leadership and ownership of resources. Next slide, please. So the next enabler that was identified was the innovation and adaptation. So the CLARE program is supporting transformation by using innovative tools, which include emerging technologies, AI, and new techniques to build adaptation and resilience. While most of the projects are focusing on combining scientific and technological innovation with indigenous knowledge to create effective and locally relevant solutions which are relevant to local contexts. Next slide, please. So this next session looks at how CLARE projects are trying to overcome the barriers to transformational adaptation. So the first barrier that was identified was power, dynamics, and governance. So that refers to that transformation adaptation is hindered by poor governance and the lack of political will, and in some cases vested interest that benefit from the current system. So what CLARE projects are actually doing are supporting local-led planning and direct community involvement to challenge the top-down governance and power dynamics which exist in the current system to ensure inclusion. So, for example, they are doing this by strengthening inclusive governance by ensuring that there's a representation of women, youth, and marginalizations and marginalized groups are in decision making. Next slide, please. So another barrier is cultural and social norms. So this refers to the deep-rooted cultural resistance, which is entrenched in the existing gender norms and historical marginalizations, which continue to hinder the adoption of transformative change. So to address this and confront this barrier, the CLARE projects are trying to improve understanding of those deep-rooted cultural barriers and support interventions that directly address root causes of social inequalities. For example, some of the projects are promoting conditions for women-led initiatives through addressing issues of masculinity at household levels that prevent participation and decision-making by women in the households. Next slide, please. So another barrier that was identified was the resource constraints. This refers to lack of resources such as human capacity, finance, which continue to hinder the systematic transformation. So to address this barrier, CLARE projects are working to overcome this through innovative and context-specific strategies. For instance, therefore, there's focus on co-creation, leveraging local knowledge, building strong partnerships, and boosting southern-based organizations and leadership. So to ensure that local stakeholders are part of this intervention, they are being trained to lessen dependence on external consultants. This will ensure that the local stakeholders are championing adaptation intervention on the ground. Next slide, please. So this is the last slide, which looks at how the CLARE project is actually fitting into the 5 dimensions of transformational adaptation, which are mentioned in the CCC technical paper on transformational adaptation. So the first dimension is change, refers to it says that change should be relevant to the context and beneficiaries by aligning with goals and context and opportunities. The second one, it should drive systemic transformation by shifting structures, relationships, and power dynamics. And then the third one refers to the speed of change. So change must accelerate progress while ensuring fairness and just transition. And it must be scalable across all levels, policies, people, and geographies. And it also must be sustainable and resilient and adaptable. It must involve different stakeholders. This will ensure that the impact remains even beyond the life cycle of the current CLARE projects. Next slide. Okay. So thanks. I think I'm done there. So the project, I think the project can go deeper in how they are trying to fit into those in those 5 dimensions in their own examples. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sonmavile, for joining in so early from South Africa for this session. It's good to have you here, and also the way it's presented here is intentionally top line because we have colleagues from different countries representing different CLARE projects who will provide on-the-ground examples. So you will see some connecting dots as you spend time in the session later, that some of the top line info that Sonmavile presented here will come again through examples later on. So the working paper our colleague from the Research for Impact Hub is working on, it's intended to be published later. So at some point in future, you will definitely get to see the detailed version of what Sonmavile just presented, and we would be definitely happy to share with you at that time. And later on in Q&A, please come up with any questions which he would be happy to respond. So moving on to the next agenda item. So I will be requesting our panel members to speak about transformational adaptation in their respective projects. So the guide question that all of us, all of the speakers will be making references to are the following. So basically the panel members will highlight what does transformational adaptation mean in their context, also provide examples that their project is undertaking, which will lead to us transformational adaptation, and what they perceive as challenges to achieving transformational adaptation in their project. Like I mentioned in the beginning, Professor Sawakar Takal is a professor at the Asian Institute of Technology. He's also the PI of the CLARE ASEAN component of the CLARE program. So Professor Sawakar, I know that your project is relatively new and you have 4 sub-projects or projects under you. So the question to kick us off, on your presentation or speaking engagement is, what enablers are you trying to leverage based on your background research, and what barriers do you foresee? Before you respond, I'll open the slides for you. And please let me know if you want to change the slide. I will be happy to support with that. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Biplavji, for your kind introduction. As you mentioned, that CLARE ASEAN is relatively a new project. The project is under implementation. We don't have yet much to show you the outcomes, but please allow me to explain the project context a little bit. Then I'll try to link how this project actually promotes, or how this project works as an enabler for transformative adaptation that we all are excited about. If you look at the title of the project, it's a CLARE ASEAN. So we are clearly centered around ASEAN, and we are clearly centered around ASEAN cities in ASEAN member states. So if you look at the IPCC 6th Assessment Report to Working Group 2, the evidence for ASEAN is very clear that urban is a very, very important issue. Urban resilience, urban adaptation, with the increasing urbanization and the worsening climate extremes, urban sustainability has become a serious problem. But there are a range of outcomes from the IPCC for ASEAN, which I'll not get into detail, but the risks are compounding. Urbanization is rampant, and the future is going to be more tougher and tougher. Next slide, please. Keeping that into the mind and also looking at the ASEAN's priority, which are clearly explained in the ASEAN documents from the ASEAN Secretariat and ASEAN processes, we try to create this CLARE ASEAN project, where our objective is to generate the knowledge and enhance the research capacity for understanding and identifying and enabling the urban resilience to climate change, which involves quite a broad spectrum of the interconnected aspects. So this program, as Biplab mentioned, is being implemented by AIT, Asian Institute of Technology, with the partners involved. And this is also endorsed by the ASEAN process, especially ASEAN Working Group on Climate Change, or AWGCC processes. Next slide, please. Now, our focus is on a multifaceted hazard-agnostic response to urban resilience to climate change, which leads into the structural change in the way cities are better acted, governed, and managed. We also have a special focus on worsening urban extreme heat, because as we all know that this region has been facing urban heat issue quite seriously in last few years. So our project is around this hazard agnostic approach, where it largely centers around nature-based solution and the urban heat, which is happening quite seriously in this region. We also paid a special attention to the most vulnerable groups and sectors and systems, and very much actor-oriented approach. And also we want to align that with the IPCC special report on cities and climate change and type of issues raised in the public documents mentioned there. So essentially, we are doing a couple of things. I'll not get into too much detail, but we'll contribute to advancing knowledge and policy through various knowledge products, production in many different ways: policy brief, research reports, evidence tailoring, a number of different approaches. Next slide, please. Will foster international collaboration and engagement, which is very heart of it, this project is also endorsed by the ASEAN's AWGCC process and the national focal points. So we'll do extensive outreach in ASEAN context and engage with the ASEAN stakeholders and also the broader research and policy community. At the same time, we are already building and will further build the community of researchers, and we'll set up and manage, we have set up and manage a multi-country ASEAN research consortium to also support uptake of the research results. Next slide, please. So essentially, the approach is a very much action-oriented. Co-creation sits in the very heart of our entire process, in-built partnership with the policymakers, especially the ASEAN Working Group on Climate Change and ASEAN member states, through the policy process and regional consortium. So what we have done, as Biplabji also mentioned, that we are putting the top-down and bottom-up approach, which means that at one hand, we do a regional synthesis, try to advance the knowledge and also bring what we know from the regional synthesis, top-down process, but also at the same time, we have place-specific research coming from the bottom-up, and then we'll do the evidence tailoring from bottom-up and top-down processes. So at the end, our key outputs will be a tailored evidence for policymakers, especially ASEAN member states, practitioners, through different kind of products and engagement. Next slide, please. So we have 4 on-ground projects. We call it place-based research projects. One focus on nature-based solution, lessons from nature-based solution, and how to make nature-based solution work through a bit of a hazard-agnostic approach. We have study sites in Bangkok, in Lao PDR, in Vietnam, also in Malaysia and Indonesia. These are the different sites where we are working. Second project is in urban heat adaptation in Mekong region, which is led by our colleagues from Thailand Environment Institute. There we are working on a research focusing on Thailand and Cambodia and Hanoi in Vietnam. The third project is led from University of Philippines, Diliman, where again, this is inside the project, they have again an international team coming from different countries. They are looking at the participatory experiments. What has worked participatory experiments and drawing lessons from participatory. The focus here is in Quezon City and the Can Tho in Vietnam. And the fourth one, we call it Bee Housing Project, where we are looking at comparative study of the urban poor settlements for the urban heat adaptation and inclusive urban futures in these cities. We are looking many cities here, Jakarta, Surabaya, Semarang, also Selangor in Malaysia. So these are led by our colleagues at Rujak Center for Urban Studies in Indonesia. So as you can see graphically here, that these are the different project location side, and as I mentioned earlier, we'll publish a series of knowledge products, place-based research, dialogues, assessment reports, decision support toolkits, policy brief, regional conferences, dialogues, and also building this regional consortium. So this is the overall approach of the project. Next slide, please. Now, how do we act as an enabler in this whole debate of the climate change adaptation? Our strong entry point is support for the governance and policy framework. Our projects will develop a knowledge products on what works and what does not work, synthesizing bottom-up research, as I mentioned you, in number of cities across 8 countries in ASEAN member states, and also top-down synthesis analysis from the gray and the peer-reviewed literature. There also the finance remains very important. How finance can enable urban resilience and adaptation in ASEAN. We are also doing evidence tailoring, try to look at how finance is flowing for urban adaptation in ASEAN, where are the leverage points, where impacts can be made, and we'll come up with a recommendation for that. Community capacity and involvement and the co-creation remains very heart of this entire initiative. So co-creation is very important, and entire research process is kind of co-creation process involving the vulnerable community. And stakeholder engagement is one of the key. As I said, that the entire process is a co-creation process. This project is endorsed by the ASEAN Working Group on Climate Change, which we are working with the ASEAN member states, and also we are contributing to the development of ASEAN Climate Change Strategic Action Plan at 2025-2030 also. We have been involved in that process. As you can see that this is very much action-oriented activity. Now, in terms of knowledge data, of course, these knowledge are very important. They help for evidence-based policymaking and activity for urban resilience in this one. Of course, there are barriers. Local capacity gaps are the barriers, but the solutions are mentoring, mutual learning, and so-called lab-based approach, which are very central to this whole process. Co-creation is something takes time at all level. Time is needed, patience is needed, and we are working from the very beginning, putting co-creation as a front into in the front. Then of course analyzing what works. And what does not work. What works is very easy, but what does not work is very difficult to collect information. So these are some barriers, but we are very optimistic to move ahead. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Sawakar, for walking us through what CLARE ASEAN is and how it is going to play an enabling role in catalyzing transformational adaptation in the long run. As Professor also mentioned at the outset, that the project just started, so there's a lot that we could follow in the months ahead, and especially towards the end of the project. So for now, Professor Sawakar kindly agreed to provide a bit of a glimpse of what that is, so we can follow up with his team later on, especially on drawing on more lessons at the end of the implementation phase. I think the slide on the role of CLARE ASEAN initiative as an enabler, I think that's a very key part of the presentation. And if you have any questions, please feel free to go back to him during Q&A. Without further ado, let me move on with another speaker. So now we have our colleague sitting next to Professor Sawakar, who is Nazia Khan Lina, representing Success Project. Nazia is based in Bangladesh, and the project that Nazia is working on, they work mainly with migrants. So my question to Nazia to start with is, what does your research say about migration as an adaptation strategy? I see you're trying to change the narrative. Tell us how this would enable transformational adaptation. So let me request Nazia to talk us more from the migration as an adaptation point of view. And I will be helping by moving the slides for her as well. Nazia, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. The name of our project is the Success, but we haven't been successful yet. We are in the middle of our project. It stands for, Success stands for Successful Intervention Pathways for Migration as Adaptation. So whenever we hear about any type of migration, we always think like there is a failure of adaptation at the place of origin. For this reason, they move to another place. So always there is failure, crisis, also when they have moved to another region, there is another issues like lack of freedom of speech, access to services, facilities, and lack of opportunities to different livelihoods. So there is always a negative perception towards the migration. We are trying to change that narrative. This is the main objective of the Success Project. We are trying to portray migration as a positive adaptation method, positive adaptation strategy. So for the Success Project, transformational adaptation is not just about building higher seawalls or introducing drought resistance crops. It's a fundamental shift in mindsets, policies, and practices that have already entrenched in people's mind that migration is always negative. So we are trying to cover the whole migration spectrum, like supporting safe and voluntary mobility for those who choose to migrate, and ensure people are successfully integrated into their new homes for the benefit of both migrants and host communities, and also boosting the resilience of people who are immobile or left behind. So the major activities, there are a few dimensions of transformational adaptation. So our work is deeply grounded in the lived realities of the people we serve. So we across to social ecological systems, mountain, coastal, dryland, and urban areas in Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, and India. So we also developed a national strategy on internal displacement. An actionable plan has been adopted in NAP, National Adaptation Plan, to implement this national strategy. So our primary goal is to shift the underlying system of policy and governance. Okay. So we strategically targeting the policy windows, the key moments when governments are actively creating new strategies to provide timely evidence. For example, we are actively providing our research findings and co-created policy tools. Like we have brochures, we have national strategy. Also, we have prepared a template which will be presented in the next COP for the CVF countries, so that they can also build their own strategy paper based on internal displacement. So our solutions are designed to be used beyond our project countries. Next slide, please. There is a learning toolkit on relocation we are developing based on our research findings. It is being designed as a flexible framework with metrics that other governments in South Asia facing similar climate-induced relocation challenges can adapt and use. This allows this solution to be scaled up. So like I have already said that based on this template has already been prepared and this will be presented and will be handed over to CVF countries. And we are trying to building a legacy after this project ends by strengthening the capacity of the local stakeholders. For example, a key output is the creation of local level and multi-stakeholder project partnerships. These partnerships bring together civil society organization, development partners, local government officers, community leaders. So we are communicating them to use our evaluation tools so that they can continue to advocate for and implement equitable migration as adaptation strategies long after the project concludes. So also we have prepared a brochure regarding the rights and rights of the displaced people and distributed it among the local people, the displaced people, and to the civil society, to the NGOs, so that they can know about their rights that they are getting from the government. And this is our target beneficiaries will be 2 million people from this. So next slide. So while doing this, we are also facing challenges also for deeply, like I before said, deeply entrenched negative narratives. We are trying to change the perceptions of people towards the migration, which is not an easy task, I would say. So when we first engage with some district level officials, their immediate reaction is often to see migration as a problem that needs to be controlled or stopped, rather than a strategy that could be supported. Overcoming this deeply ingrained opinion or migration as a failure mindset is our biggest hurdle. And another one is policy and institutional inertia. So migration often falls into a policy gap. In one of our research sites, the Ministry of Agriculture is responsible for rural livelihoods and the Ministry of Urban Development for cities, and there is no single government body responsible for the well-being and integration of a person moving between these two spaces. So this siloed approach is a major institutional barrier. Another I would like to highlight, like we have to approach three governments. Like if you have any idea about the Bangladesh government, we had a government back in 2023. Now we have the interim government, and in 2026 there will be another government because there is election in February. So we have to approach, already we are approaching the governments, and we have to do it all over again for new government. So that's lagging behind us, and also difficult for us to finish the project in time, and also to show or portray the results of our findings, as we are presenting to three governments. So it's quite a slow process for changing the mindset of these people. And okay, so ensuring a just and equitable process. So a major risk is maladaptation. For instance, a government-led relocation might move a community to a new site that is safe from floods, or if it doesn't consider women's access to market or social networks, it could destroy their livelihoods and social capital, making them more vulnerable in other ways. So we have to be vigilant to ensure adaptation is fair for everyone. And the complexity of different contexts. An intervention successfully promotes new income sources for a left-behind family in the mountain community in Nepal will likely be completely different from what is needed for a family in a coastal fishing community in Bangladesh. So our approach actually cannot be one size fits for all. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, okay. So, no, the back one, previous one. Okay. So there are some ways we are trying to tackling these challenges to ensure transformational outcomes, like for changing the perception of people. We don't just write academic reports or based on our findings. We are trying to create coffee table books, pictorial books, or calendars using powerful images from our photo voice activities. One of our methodology is photo voice. Like we give cameras to local people so that they can portray their actual challenges, actual problems, and we bring those to the tables of the policymakers. So this will be shown and distributed in our local, district, and national workshops to visually and accessibly tell the real and human stories of migrants, making the case for supportive policies in a much more compelling way. So we are doing workshops at 3 levels, local, district, and national level to change the narratives and the negative perceptions. So to break down the policy inertia, our co-creation, of course, the co-creation approach is our main tool. By developing our evaluation tools and adaptation pathways with government stakeholders from different ministries at the same table from the very beginning. We build ownership and foster the cross-departmental relationship needed for integrated policy. So we take their opinion as well, and we try to integrate them so that they are more eager to participate or to foster the process of the changes. And also to ensure equity, our data collection is explicitly designed to capture gender disaggregated data. We are conducting life history interviews specifically with women who are heads of households or have been left behind. So this allows us to understand their unique challenges and ensure that our proposed interventions, like access to finance or social safety nets, are designed to meet their specific needs and don't advertently cause harm. Okay, so to address the complexity, our project is divided into specific work packages, and one is for the origin area, one is for the destination area, and one is for the plant relocation. So this allows us to generate deep context-specific knowledge for each situation, which we will then use to develop multifaceted range of interventions that will be tested and calibrated with our local partners in each country to ensure they are a good fit. Okay, next.
Thanks, Nazia. I'm going to have to request you to skip the next slide in the interest of time, but we can definitely get back during the Q&A.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Nazia. Thanks very much. I was also listening very carefully, how the narrative change is being practiced, or at least you are attempting to do so in your context, where migration is normally seen as a problem and not an adaptation strategy. So we have next speaker who is going to join online from the Philippines. Her name is Flora. Monica Belinario. She is the Program Implementation and Innovation Finance Director. As I mentioned, I just wanted to sort of first go with the speakers who have the slides, and then we will move on to other speakers just to finish that off first. So Flora, I give the floor to you. Over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you, Biplav, for moving the slides for me. I'm sorry I cannot be there in person, but due to some circumstances, but glad that I will be presenting today. Good afternoon again, everyone. So today I'll share how Rare's Fish Forever work in the Philippines. through the Climate Reefs project is helping coastal communities adapt to the climate crisis. This is about transformational adaptation, so not just coping with change, but reshaping systems so that communities and ecosystems can thrive together. So just a quick overview of the climate reefs. So it aims to identify the adaptive reefs and reduce the climate vulnerability of reef-reliant communities, both in Indonesia and the Philippines. And we hope to measure how reef structure and temperature conditions predict biodiversity and adaptive capacity. We will explore pathways to strengthen both ecological and social resilience with a focus on women and vulnerable groups. And we will provide proof of concept that adaptive reefs can be identified from space. So for today, I'll focus mainly on the Philippines context and our work with our small-scale fishers. So now that we know what the climate reefs is all about, so let's take a step back on the next slide and look at why this work is so urgent in the context of the fisheries-dependent communities, fisheries dependent on coral reef ecosystem communities. On the next slide, we will see that really climate change threatens the food security and livelihoods of nearly 1 billion people who benefit from coral reef ecosystems. The Philippines is among the most climate vulnerable countries in the world. Rising seas, stronger storms, and warming oceans are devastating reef and even fish populations. Small-scale fishers are on the front lines. They are reliant on climate-sensitive livelihoods, already burdened by environmental degradation and poverty, and this often leads to overfishing. For them, adaptation is not an option, is not optional, it's a survival. So, and incremental steps are no longer enough. So what do we mean when we say transformational adaptation in the case of our work in the small-scale fishers? And how does RARE's Fish Forever work make it real? So transformational adaptation means bold systemic shifts. In our case, it integrates ecological health, community well-being, and governance reforms. So this is where RARE's Fish Forever work comes in. Our approach combines conservation and community-led management in order to create the real conservation policy and community action to create the real resilience. So at the center of that approach is the community-led management, wherein people closest to the resource lead its protection and enforcement, supported by enabling systems such as science, governance, sustainable financing, and behavior adoption. So the Climate Reefs project strengthened this model, especially by creating pathways for women and small-scale fishers and vulnerable groups to build adaptive capacity. So let me break down the 3 enablers that make this approach work. So starting with science. So our first enabler is science. So we conduct habitat assessments, mapping reefs, mangroves, seagrass beds. We also conducted the larval connectivity study and combined this with socioeconomic profiles through our focus group discussion, community profiling, to design locally tailored solutions such as marine reserves, managed access zones, and alternative livelihoods, identification of alternative livelihoods for our small-scale fishers. So data makes adaptation actionable. We also collaborate with academic institutions in this project, the University of Leeds as our lead, to apply the coral eDNA analysis, exploring the reef adaptability at a genetic level. So we hope to share these pioneering results in the upcoming conferences soon. But science alone isn't enough. So to make change last, we also need a strong policy. So on the next slide, so one of the second enabler is the policy support. So we partner with local government to institutionalize marine protected areas and fisheries management plans. So these ordinances provide the legal backbone for enforcement and embed adaptation in local development. So local government unit alliances and provincial networks strengthen cooperation, while at the national level, we align local actions with broader climate priorities such as preferential rights for small-scale fishers and climate resilience policies. Also through the Coastal 500, led by a global network of local leaders, we amplify these efforts and ensure that community-led management is recognized and supported, when policy really makes change last. So, and finally, the enabler that gives this approach its heart and power is the community engagement. So this is the heart and the core of our work at RARE, at the Fish Forever's approach, is the community engagement. So this is where fishers co-design management rules, ensuring ownership of the solutions. So we run series of behavior change campaigns, such as, in this case, the Kapehan Karagatan Kaalaman, or Coffee Ocean Knowledge, which brings fishers together to discuss management issues, stewardship, and even law enforcement. So this campaign at the early onset doubled Fisheries Council attendance even from 23 to 50%, and even tripled women's participation in fisheries management. So we also build financial resilience through the establishment of the Fish Forever Savings Clubs. So these groups, where 80% of the members are fishers' wives, provide savings, credit, and safety net against climate and financial shocks. So this also serves as a platform to where we really intensify our community engagement activities and inform the communities related to the fisheries management strategies or moves that we're doing. So today there are more than 700 savings club with more than 16,000 members, and collectively savings around $6.2 million. So this only shows that when communities are empowered, compliance improves, and even resilience will eventually grow and change becomes sustainable. And of course, despite these successes, there are still barriers we must contend with. So there are, I think this was mentioned also earlier, that governance gaps like weak enforcement and frequent political turnover. I think this is common across countries that we're working, especially in the Asia. Ecological shocks such as typhoons and coral bleaching that can even erase years of our progress of our work. And then fragmented governance and overlapping mandates that even undermine the trust of the community. So these barriers demand constant attention and adaptive strategies. But how do we scale and make transformational adoption possible at a larger level? So on the next slide, you can see the Fish Forever model proves that transformation on the next slide is possible when science, policy, and communities are aligned. So this is where Fish Forever, strengthened by the Climate Reefs project, is not just about fisheries. It is transformational adaptation in action by blending data, supportive policy, strong community leadership. We can ensure that coastal communities not only survive but thrive in the face of climate change. So even as one fisher told us when we do our community consultations, when the community leads, the ocean heals. So that's it for today. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Flora, for being concise, especially talking to the point with 3 enablers. It was easy to follow. I will not comment in the interest of time. We'll keep that at the end. So let me move on to the last slide presentation of today, which is from Pavan. He's from Wells Lab. He will be speaking more about how his project is related to transformational adaptation. He's from Clarity. So his project convenes transformational labs in India, taking a labs approach. His team is working with farmers on water management and agriculture. So we want to hear from Pawan, what does that mean? What does transformational adaptation mean to them, and what are some of the enablers? Let me help him with by moving the slides.
Thank you so much, Biplav. Hi, everyone. I know that it's the afternoon, so we'll keep this a little brief and hopefully a little engaging. So I work in this large program called Climate Adaptation and Resilience in Tropical Drylands. So I'll just give a little bit of context on the scope of the work and then talk really about the lessons that we've learned so far. The first is that drylands are 40% of the land surface of the world. And overall, drylands are home to about 2 billion people. 90% of these people are living in developing countries. And often, dryland communities are among the most poorest and the most marginalized communities, even within those country contexts. One of the driving features of drylands, and drylands range from, arid, semi-arid deserts all the way to sort of arid, subhumid regions where agriculture and other things might be practiced. Seasonal and perennial water scarcity is a predominant feature. And one of the solutions to that, like there is the surface water and irrigation attempts that are made, there are also groundwater is also becomes an important enabler of climate adaptation, because groundwater can potentially buffer some of the variability and the shocks that come with climate. Right. However, given that water is extremely scarce, I'll come to this slide in a moment. Given that water is extremely scarce, there's competing use for drinking water, industrial use, and traditional agrarian use. Right. So within Clarity, what we've done is we've created these 4 transformation labs across India, Tanzania, Niger, Nigeria. And the aim in each of these transformation labs, think of them as the size of a district or a county or a region. It's to identify problems and innovative solutions, to conceive and co-create transformational pathways, and to facilitate co-learning and scaling for knowledge within these transformation labs and beyond this for tropical drylands overall. Next slide. So I will mainly be focusing on insights from one such transformation lab. This is a region called Raichur in southern India. Raichur is very simply a hot, dry place, right? Summer temperatures routinely exceed 40 degrees Celsius. If you're unfortunate, it touches 47, 48. We've heard reports of 50 degrees as well. But for being such a hot, dry place, it receives about 500 to 600 millimeters of rainfall in a year. But it's also fortunate in that it's bounded by rivers. In the map that you see here, the northern and the southern boundaries are 2 rivers. And what the Indian state has done over the last 80 years is to build canal networks from these 2 rivers to provide irrigation for a significant chunk of the district. About 1/3 of the land is currently irrigated. In spite of this, the challenge with canal infrastructure is that a lot of this water ends up as evaporation. And the canal networks are also inherently fairly unequal, where the few farmers who at the head end of these canal networks who have access to a lot of water end up using the same water for doing flood field irrigation and doing very water intensive crops like rice as paddy or sugarcane, etc. Here, rice is the predominant one. And at the tail end of these same canal networks, farmers are effectively rain-fed farmers, dependent on the monsoons, able to mainly grow one single crop. Right. So I think one of the important things was that people who do have access to water don't have control over that water. Right. So like, for example, there are other regions in India, and I'm sure in Southeast Asia, where people have been growing rice for centuries, if not millennia, where growing rice is a part of identity. Here, in some of the regions, people have been growing rice for the past 15 years only because canals came in. So there's no love for growing rice, and rice is a bad crop to be grown in this area. But because the government procurement systems, market systems, all of that align in a way, it's easier to grow rice even though it's not the best thing to do. So a necessary lever, so I'll just come to our lessons. If you can go to the next slide, Biplav. So a necessary lever, therefore, to effecting transformative adaptation in Raichur is infrastructure, especially last mile irrigation infrastructure. Right? Typically, bulk irrigation infrastructure stops about half to a quarter kilometer away from the farm gate. And beyond that, water flows through ditches. So if you can provide last mile irrigation infrastructure, provide control, then farmers can, grow more crops per every drop of water that they use. They can be more efficient and allow this water to get further through the network, such that you include more of the farmers and you make things more equitable. Right. But one of the first lessons that we learned in all of our work is that while individual levers may result in sort of incremental adaptation, they're not sufficient to overcome the lock-ins, right? So people are also growing rice because that's what's supported by the markets. It's also what's supported by the easily accessible agricultural inputs that are available. So if we really want to go from incremental adaptation to transformative adaptation, you need to figure out your set of necessary levers, but also together what is a set of sufficient levers where if you can move all of them, then the system can go from its current state to a better state, a more sustainable state, right? So here, some of this in hindsight looks obvious, but to actually arrive at what do you do and what do you choose not to do can be quite challenging. For example, malnutrition is a big challenge in this region as well, but we sort of learned that achieving nutritional security through climate adaptation efforts alone will actually be quite challenging. But what we can do to significantly improve incomes and reduce poverty in this region is to work on 5 levers together, right? So it's infrastructure, but you also want to develop technical capacity of farmers and farmer groups to count and manage water at a local level. You want to transform how agricultural inputs are available for a diverse set of modern agricultural practices. You want to reduce the labor and the drudgery associated with a lot of these transitions and transformations. So you want to intervene by helping manage labor as well. And you want to provide market access for, say, diverse cropping systems, diverse and regenerative cropping systems that we might want to promote. So it's important to find this sort of necessary and sufficient set of levers. And while doing all of this, sequencing matters, but I think parallel action matters far more than sequencing, because you can end up with bottlenecks very often, but you can move on 2 or 3 points simultaneously, and over time you will have overlap and coverage in order to get the transformational adaptation that you want. 3, and people have talked about this earlier, co-creation is really, really important. We can't go in and say, this is how tropical drylands work. This is why I'm a water person. Like Well Labs, we are heavy on water, therefore we intervene on water. We really have to discover what are the individual specific pain points that government agencies, that farmer groups and others actually have. And here, when I talked about control over water, this is something that came through by conversations with farmers, where people were expressing that they're not just willing, but they're eager to change how they practice agriculture if someone can deliver control over water. Similarly, one of the challenges in India is, I think, a lot of effort goes into rain-fed farming because typically communities are more vulnerable, poorer, and more cut off from most policy interventions. But canals have their own challenges. So initially we thought we should work a lot on changing the narratives around how you need more community involvement in canal irrigation and so on. But when we spoke to the relevant government authorities, this was priority number 1, saying that, look, we have spent billions of dollars, and many big Indian states literally spend billions of dollars every year on irrigation infrastructure, but it's not always translating to farmer incomes. So they were clear that, look, we are looking for specific solutions that will improve incomes. So go try things, we'll give you support. You don't need to convince us, right? So talking to them, understanding what their priorities and pain points are, and incorporating that into our research is really, really helpful. But in doing so, as a researcher or research-led practitioners, there's also a challenge. The challenge is that you need to be able to deliver value right away. You can't go in and say, I will do this research for 3 years and then I'll come back to you with my findings. So you will have to design programs in a way that some value is available, say because farmers come together, they have more bargaining power, for example, some tangible outputs that are there for people who engage with you within a few months at most, and maybe much better outcomes in years and maybe in longer time frames. And my final point here is that whenever we are building systems for transformative adaptation, you have to build for heterogeneity. You need to allow for a menu of options on agricultural inputs, on access to water, on control, and so on, because there's just high amount of diversity in every single landscape, especially in a context like India. So if you build with a system where I have one solution for agricultural inputs, I have one solution for labor, it usually fails. And it also does not allow for opt-in and truly sort of bottom-up action. So having a menu of options where people choose to participate, learn from each other, and over time increase adoption, I think is really helpful. With that, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Pawan. There's a lot of depth in there in terms of analysis. We'll pick that up later. So in the interest of time, let me ask my another colleague who is sitting next to Pawan. He is from Nepal. He's implementing a project called ICRA, and he will talk about the intersectionality in climate risk assessment and how this contributes to catalyzing transformational adaptation. But since his project is new, he also has the freedom to sort of provide a broader picture before linking that with ICRA. So Razu, over to you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. Well, a lot of things have been said today in terms of looking at the transformational adaptation and issues related to that. In the morning, we had a very excellent the plenary here, and Dr. Dakal was also here to give us the oversight of that. Just some of the examples or the context reflecting from Nepal and the work that we would be engaging. I will just try and focus that a little bit more on that. But before getting into the work that we are engaging in, I just wanted to touch the context of Nepal when it comes to transformational adaptation. Because as we engage in this work that is very much now focusing on with the impacts of climate change and what we're trying to do on the ground, just wanted to stress that we're not doing things in vacuum, because there are things are already happening on the ground. But how do we make things happen differently, or do the similar things maybe differently? We're taking the climate change context into account, and that is one of the things that I wanted to mention. But at the same time, our colleague also mentioned that there is no one-size-fits-all approach, because even if we just take the context of Nepal, Nepal is a tiered country where we have mountains, hills, and the plains, also from the east to west. The context differs so much when you go from one region to the other region. So I think that's a very important context to really take into account. But having said that, there are four primary pillars that we quite intensely look into. One, as said by other colleagues as well, the policy instruments. What kind of policy instruments and framework really put in place so that is actually addressing the vulnerability on the ground, so that the communities feel that their issues are actually being addressed. And as I mentioned earlier, the silos approach is not working, whether it comes to institutions, whether it comes to the sectors or any intervention that you do. So how do you look into more inclusive sectoral issues? Because if you're talking about the people, communities on the ground, and things like water, agriculture, health, or disaster management, these issues all are connected. That is one thing. The second part is also being very clear with the targeted communities that we're going to address. Because if we have that clear policies, and then that is targeting communities going on the ground, probably the community means different for different contexts, the size and all. But do we really know who are we addressing? Where the things are really changing, or that we would like to change? I think that's a very key element. The third pillar that I want to talk about are the inputs, which is also the enablers. Like finance technologies have been very key to really enabling this, because sometimes what is the case is there are resources, but those resources are extremely difficult to access. When you access resources, those resources are not being observed well on the ground, so that communities don't, in fact, benefit. Sometimes there are resources that is being accessed, but again, it doesn't go to the right communities. That's why I talked about the targeted communities that we need to really talk about. The other input that I also wanted to, in the fourth point, want to talk about is the capacity issue. When I said capacity, of course, you can link it to governance and others, but the institutions and the human resources in country. at the national, subnational, and the local level. Because often what we see is that a lot of projects where people from outside come in, do the work, but then there's no memory of that. People leave and then the expertise is also gone. So how do we build that institutions in the country level and human resource needed for that? I think if we picture those enablers, like the 4 pillars and the 2 enablers that I talked about, that would be really helpful in terms of going with the ownership, the engagement of the people, and looking into holistic approach of socioeconomic conditions. Because here often what I see is there are SDGs being promoted by some. Then we have the adaptation work being promoted, and sometimes there is a silo space. They're not even talking to each other. But when it means the same thing for the community, so how do you really work into that would be extremely important. And that would really link us, when I talked about the capacity and the targeted community, is there something like, do you see the underlying vulnerabilities or the context where the root causes are being really addressed or not? That because sometimes we're just doing the top line issues, and then the underlying issues are not being addressed. In that particular context, our research is trying to focus on one of the elements that we're going to look into, and that is intersectionality in the context of climate risk assessment. And while I gave that context precisely is, if we do the intersectionality analysis, we have prepared national adaptation plans, we have done the climate risk assessment based on that, the plans are being prepared. But have we really looked into the overall intersectionality into that particular context or not? And what are the current challenges and the underlying factors that really shapes that plans and then the policies and the institutions going forward? We really wanted to look into that. But at the same time, understanding of intersectional inequalities and how they influence the exposure and vulnerability. If you're taking into that element into account, then would our adaptation approaches be different to that of the existing plans that we have currently or not? I can give an example. For instance, we talk about gender issues in general. We talk about that. We talk about participation of vulnerable communities. But when you talk about gender, do we take into account about if you're talking about the women issues, then disabled women, do we take into that account or not? Do we talk about we have the system called caste system where the untouchability is very high. So do we talk about the section of those women who are who come from that particular section of the community? So what is it that is really shaping these? And are these factors really integrated into the assessment of the climate risk or not? I think that would be extremely important, because once you look into that aspect, our institutions would be very different. Our planning process and the policies that we see would be very different. And our work on capacity itself would be very different. That is the expectation that we have currently. So by looking into that, what would be the next steps as you look into the potential solutions that we want to also derive into? So as I said, also nicely, our colleague, Biplabji also mentioned that we are, quite early, but these are the elements that we want to really see. But of course, now there are a lot of things already happening on the ground. This morning, our Joint Secretary from the Ministry of Forest and Environment also gave the scenario in the plenary about what are the institutions, how the government is working and all. But when it comes to practice, because Nepal is quite rich in terms of when you see the policy instruments being in place, but looking into that depth, that detail is yet to be seen. And we have a long way to go when it comes to actual implementation, and that's where we need to really shape this going forward. I will end there. Thank you very much. And if there's anything, I'm happy to take questions later. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Raju, for offering insights, especially on the intersectionality aspect, which has been less discussed, but very important to talk about. So we're running a bit late, so I'm going to ask our next panel member, Lutfor, who is joining from Bangladesh ICAD, to be brief in his intervention. Lutfor, can I ask our technical colleague to zoom in on him? His name is Lutfor. If you can find him on MS Teams. So Lutfor comes from a project called Innovative Facilitation. That project provides fellowships. So if Lutfor, if you could tell us more about the fellowship aspects on, what tools and methods are you using that would eventually help catalyze transformational adaptation through fellowships. Over to you, Lutfer. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, and I apologize for the, my background, and also I'm talking to you a little bit ups and down on internet issues. But thank you, good afternoon, and thank you APAN organization for creating this opportunity platform, and to CLARE and our colleagues, people from Planet for supporting our participation. Although I can be present in online, I'm delighted to join on online and share few of the reflection of innovative facilitation program. So in our projects, the adaptation, transformational adaptation means reimagining how climate colleagues are dialogues, how climate change dialogue are designed and facilitated, and moving from business as usual workshop to inclusive creative process where marginal people, boys, women, youth space and adaptations pathway. And it's about building a new generation of facilitators who can drive systematic change in resilient planning. And the activity what we are doing in our fellowship program, so we are facilitating 40 climate 40 fellows across Asia and Africa, and this engage in deep learning workshop, peer-to-peer exchange, innovative pods and creative residencies that combine science, practice and art. So we also produce learning tools like podcast, guides and also virtual training course for the learners especially. And what are the challenges we face? That we see challenges in sustainable momentum beyond the fellowship. So ensuring organizational support, tackling digital barriers for participation, and moving from gender sensitive to true gender transformative practice. So transformational adaptation takes time and trust, but we believe investing in facilitation skill is one of the strongest pathway to move over their barriers. So thank you once again for this opportunity, and we look forward to continue to dialogue and working together to make adaptation not only effective, but also inclusive and transformative. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Lut, for being available, even though you had other competing priorities, on your Friday, which is not a working day in Bangladesh. Again, I was saying we're a bit short of time. There's a Q&A as part of the agenda, but my apologies. If I can request participants to directly reach out to the speakers on the stage after this, after 15:30, that would be greatly appreciated. And if you have questions to the online speakers, please get in touch with me right after the session. So at the end, we have a vote of thanks from Aryan Dihan. He is from IDRC, Senior Program Specialist. He's been overseeing CLARE program in Asia. He has observed the evolution of different CLARE projects, and we would like to hear some of the key takeaways from this session. Aryan, I give the floor to you and also request you to close the session. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Biplav. Can you hear me okay?
We do, and I request our technical colleague to zoom in on Aryan, A-R-J-A-N.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to the participants at this for this event. I can't see anybody. I know that you're in a very big room, and I just want to thank you for your for attention to this. I hope that you have what you've seen here is I admit challenging, and therefore we ran out of time, but a wonderful presentation of the approaches in the different CLARE projects to generating evidence and making sure that evidence is generated with local communities. And as I think Flora very nicely highlighted, working with policymakers, making sure that the science that's generated is made as useful as possible and co-created to make sure that we bring those efforts to the best possible transformational adaptation activity. You've seen that through a wide range of sectors, and CLARE is set up like that because it's not a sector-specific program, obviously, but really what we're trying to highlight here is how those processes of co-created, based in evidence, can be made useful for the activities that all of you in the room at this wonderful APAN Forum stands for. So I do want to apologize for the fact that we went over time. I hope you understand why, given the depth of that work, the wide range of this work, and as people have said, I hope you'll be able to reach out and learn more about those activities. And finally, I don't want to thank Biplav for putting this together. Wonderful work, and all the panelists that made all the way to Bangkok, often fighting issues of visas and so on. Thank you for doing that, and for the people who couldn't make it for many different reasons, also for joining online. Thank you again, Biplav. Thank you all panelists. Thank you to the people who listened. And with that, I'd like to close the session. Thank you.